Our next speaker, Pulitzer Prize novelist, poet, social justice fighter, lifelong activist in the struggle for humanity's advancement, Alice Walker.
But look at us, we're still here. And you know, actually what really strikes me sometimes is it feels like we're the same people. Don't you feel that sometimes? Yeah, but some of us had to die, you know, but here we are. We look at each other and we see actually the same people who were students, you know, and they were trying to tell us. One of my teachers, by the way, my favorite teacher was Howard Zinn. And he used to drag a couple of us to all these incredible meetings with people just like us, you know, but I didn't know that then. I thought, who are these people that they care, you know, about the students in the South, the black students in the South, for instance. But what is lovely is coming in here today and actually seeing us still where we were. Yeah, that's right. Still wanting justice, still finding the places in the. So I'm very happy to be here with John Shipton and Gabriel, and I would like very much at some point to see Gabriel's namesake, who is little Gabriel, Julian Assange's son, one of his children. There's something so incredibly moving to me and hopeful to know that Julian Assange has actually children, has a partner, has, one hopes, very happy days, because it says something about the spirit that we need as we continue to struggle against some of the most evil things on this planet.
Amen.
And I've noticed this same kind of, this indefatigable energy of love and compassion and smarts in MEAA Abdul-Jamal, who you'll be hearing later, who has a kind of humor, actually, because, at some point, I suppose, you have to have some humor, or you just die. I've gone to visit both of these incredible men in prison. When I went to visit MEAA the first time, just before coming out of wherever they were keeping him, they made him go through all of these incredibly dehumanizing exercises to prove he didn't have weapons. I mean, like, how could he? He was completely chained. And also, I think the same with Julian. There is a sense of, having your self-respect, having your own sense of what is right to guide you, which is what I feel is possibly true of the people in this room, that somehow something guided you here, something let you know that you could not sit by and watch this man die, basically, in prison, when we could together possibly free him. And it's not impossible. I mean, the thing about optimists, is that often they say about us that we are just, crazy. Because look at what's coming down on us all the time. But we have something in us. It's a wonderful thing. We have something in us that says we are going to challenge this. We are going to prevail. And we may, be knocked down as many times as we have been knocked down. And how many times we've been knocked down? Without number. But we keep going. And this is one of the most beautiful things about the human spirit. I was watching a documentary about Julian just last night, and they were trying, all the images, for instance, I wish I could remember what it's called, but all the images of him were scowling, looking mean, squinched up eyes, like he was about to, stab somebody. Not one image like this. Not one image showing a human being. Not one image showing this is somebody's father. This is somebody's partner. This is somebody who loves to be in laughter and joy as he's doing his work. And that's part of the key for us. While we're doing our work, to remember to be joyful. To remember that, they lay on all of us. Like we grieve. It's not, he's in prison, but we are also, part of us has to be with him. And with MEAA. It's just who we are. We can't help it. But at the same time, we understand that what they are struggling for is our joy, is our ability to feel, gratitude for being able, like today, to come together and to make it be known to anybody who can listen or who can tune in, that no, we don't agree with these policies that hurt our people, that imprison our people, that kill our people, and really deeply, and this is really, hard, deeply hurt our children. I can hardly stand thinking of Julian's children. What are they to make of this? Who are they to be when they grow up? How can they look, the world in the face, knowing what it has tried to do, so much of it has tried to do. But then there we are. Hallelujah. And they can look at us. Yes. So I really feel like we are, we are what we are. We're the people in this room. What can we do? But this has always been true. When Frederick Douglass came up from slavery, he talked to people just like us. Well, mostly just like you. But he talked to us in small groups who were determined to end enslavement of human beings. And they did it. They freed a whole world of people. And this is what we have to do for Julian. We have to get him out of there. And we can. And we must never think we can't. Never. Thanks.
In 1964, a group of students at UC Berkeley who were involved in the civil rights movement challenged the restriction of free speech rights on campus. Their protest spread nationwide, giving birth to the free speech movement. Mario Savio, who became a spokesperson for the movement, defined free speech as not a tactic, something to win for political advantage, but rather it was something that represents the very dignity of what it means to be a human. He urged his fellow students to fight against the oppression of the machine that was destroying this dignity. Over 50 years later, in spring of 2010, we've seen a flame of free speech rekindled on the internet. Wikileaks blazed into a global stage with the publication of the Colorado Matter video. Uncensored images of modern war depicting US military airstrikes killing innocent civilians, including Reuters journalists, in a suburb of Iraq. Let people around the world see the faces of real victims of the US war on terror. Wikileaks' publication of the Iraq war logs revealed the existence of an estimated 15,000 civilian casualties that were previously unknown. It has restored the dignity of those victims of senseless war. From the Icelandic Revolution to the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement, empowered by the Wikileaks publications, ordinary people around the world began to take the course of their life into their own hands. Julian Assange and whistleblower Julian Manning took tremendous risks to stop the machine of US imperialism. They sacrificed their personal liberty so that we can create a truly democratic society in which each person's dignity is respected. Stopping the US government's effort to extradite Julian is the first and very important step of creating a just society. And it requires our uncompromising courage. Standing up for Julian's freedom is to stand up for our right to free speech. It is to stand up for our own dignity. May each of us find strength within ourselves to defend the heart of what it means to be human. From here in the Bay Area, at the birthplace of the free speech movement, let us make our courage become contagious. Free Julian Assange.
A campaigner for his brother's freedom. Let's give a warm welcome to Gabriel Shipton.
Thanks to Jeff and Cynthia and Jean for getting this all together. It's amazing turnout. I think everywhere. My father and I have been in the US since the beginning of June, and everywhere we've gone, we've seen this upwelling of support. From when we started out in Miami, up to New York, the East Coast, Boston, Philadelphia, across to Chicago, Columbus, Denver. It's just really taken our breath away. Just people coming out, and that's really led to this sort of, there's been 30 or so articles since we started talking about Julian's case again. We've been on national news channels talking about Julian's case, dozens and dozens of local radio shows as we've travelled across the country. So, it's really, for something that nobody was talking about, a few months ago. It's really amazing just to see that, what this sort of public support can bring and the attention it can bring back to Julian's case and what it means for press freedoms in the US and abroad. So I'll just update you where Julian won his extradition case in January. At the beginning of January, the judge found that if he was extradited to the US, he would likely commit suicide. So it was basically a death sentence. And on that basis, she rejected Julian's extradition. The US DOJ immediately appealed that decision, or signalled their intention to appeal. And then a few days later, Julian's bail was rejected on the 6th of January. So he is now in a maximum security prison. It's his third year in that prison on the outskirts of London. And it's been 6 months since he won his extradition hearing, and we still don't know when or whether an appeal will be heard. So he's sort of in this limbo. I said this before, but it becomes when you go and see him. I went to see him in October, and it just becomes really evident that all the other prisoners, most of them have a sentence, and so they have something to aim for, and their families can plan, and they can make plans for homecoming parties or things like that. But in Julian's case, there is no sentence. He's an innocent man in a maximum security prison on remand, and we just don't know when it's going to end. And this is sort of just another form of punishment through process that Julian suffered under for the last 12 years now. And I know Jeff mentioned this earlier, but there's Stunden, this Icelandic publication, has come out with this story today that the major witness in the US DOJ's case has admitted to fabricating key accusations within the case. His name is Siggy Thordarson, and he's provided to Stunden chat logs which back up his claim of fabrication. which is, this is really big, and it just sort of tears the prosecution's whole case apart. These accusations, these false accusations, were all through the judgment, the January 4th judgment. So they were repeated by the judge. So this is really big news for Julian and for this case. I would just want to talk about a phenomenon that we see. This isn't just about Julian. This is about press freedoms, and Julian's been targeted and made an example of, so that everyone around the world can see. If you publish this sort of thing, then this is what's going to happen to you. So what we've seen, around the world over the last year is this sort of phenomena that when the State Department and the DOJ are confronting, the State Department are confronting overseas authoritarian states or totalitarian states on their human rights record or their press freedom record, or how they're treating their prisoners, they often get Assange thrown back in their face. Look what you're doing to Assange. How can you tell us, how can you confront us on our human rights or our press freedoms? So we've seen this, with the UK ambassador to Russia. The Russian ambassador to the UK asked about Navalny. He said, well, down the road you've got Assange, a publisher, locked in prison. Who are you to confront us about our treatment of Navalny? Aliyev, who's a totalitarian leader in Azerbaijan, confronted on his record of press freedom and locking a journalist in prison, torturing journalists by a BBC interviewer. He said, who are you to ask me that? Look, you've got a journalist in prison in your country. The Chinese Foreign Affairs spokesperson recently, when they were confronted on their human rights and press freedoms in their country, brought up Assange. What about Assange? So I think one way the Biden administration can sort of re-establish this idea that the US has this moral high ground is to just drop this case and just let it go, and it will just send a message to all journalists. It will send a message to journalists all over the world, not just in the US. That they have this support. So in the US, what we've seen now is, I know, the mainstream media is not. We all know they're not. I guess we all see them for what they are. But it is in their interest to have this case dropped, and that's why we've seen, the executive editors from the Washington Post, executive editors from the New York Times, coming out and saying that this prosecution is a danger to the First Amendment, it's a danger to press freedom. We're seeing that because they have to consider, when they have a story that comes on their desk, a national security story, that they now have to consider, will this story land me an espionage prosecution? Will my journalists have an espionage prosecution if we publish this story? And that has a flow-on effect. So now we have people who bring us these revelations. So say the Chelsea Manning of now, or a future Chelsea Manning, or Edward Snowden. They have to consider before they decide that they want to bring this information to us. How are they going to deliver it to us? They won't. If they take it to the New York Times, if they take it to the Washington Post, they know that these people cannot publish without the threat of an espionage prosecution. So it has this flow-on effect for all these revelations that have been brought to us over the years. So I just want to leave you with that. And a big thank you for everyone's generosity as well. That's absolutely incredible, amazing. And thanks again to all the organisers, and thank you.
Worldly informed fighter for freedom and against war, U.S. imperialist war in particular. And I might add that in addition to the horrors that Julian released on the Iraq War, the United States conducted a war based on the lie that the Iraqi government had weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, and they killed by sanctions and murder 1.5 million people. They killed 4 million people in Vietnam when they said that a Vietnamese sampan attacked an American destroyer. Their sanctions and horrors have killed 50,000 people in Venezuela because they had the nerve to conduct elections to elect their own president and run their own country, as opposed to it being run by the Rockefellers and the imperial powers. The United States, along with Israel, was the only nation on earth that voted last week to maintain the illegal sanctions against Cuba.
Ooh.
Because Cuba has insists on its right to self-determination, as all other oppressed nations. And the United States has conducted a vicious war against the Syrian people, with 500,000 people dead, and the U.S. organizing with NATO and the Gulf state monarchies a vicious, illegal war that at one point occupied 3/4 of the Syrian population. And the polls, the Gallup poll in England, said the majority of the Syrian people support the government of that country. And 8% support the U.S. coalition of the willing that is slaughtering the Syrian people. We're proud to have Syria Solidarity movement on board today. So our slogan is U.S. out now, bring the troops home now. Abolish the war budget. Our next speaker, I'm so proud to introduce, is Julian Assange's dad. Please give a warm welcome to John Shipton.
Well, when I scan here, look over all these lovely faces and the hospitality and generosity that's been extended to Gabrielle and I as we travel across the continental United States, I am hesitant to embark upon a criticism of the foreign policy of the United States. My heart is warm. You saw Jeff and Gabrielle mention Ziggy in Iceland, the FBI witness. This is part of a series of fabrications and falsities. In the first place, falling upon Julian. In the first place, issuing from the Swedish prosecuting authority. Sweden back in the 70s and 80s was known as a model society. Now, it's simply a place with a declined stature of lawful administration and sells junk furniture that brought disgrace upon themselves. Disgrace. The Crown Prosecuting Service embarked upon a conspiracy with the Swedish prosecuting authority to keep Julian in the embassy for 7.5 years. Julian fought 2 cases in Sweden to forward the case. The Swedish prosecuting authority under Marianne Nye and the Crown Prosecuting Service under Paul Close conspired together. We have the evidence. Stefania Morizzi, under a series of FOIs brought in the British courts, revealed the details of their conspiracy together in order to keep Julian in the embassy. Silly quotes. You're not getting cold feet, are you? That's addressed by Paul Close, the UK, to Marianne Nye, Sweden. Julian asked, could he leave Sweden? And Marianne Nye said, yes, that's fine, you can leave. And immediately Julian got on the plane. They stole all his computers. He landed in London. Marianne Nye issued a red notice. A red notice is issued through Interpol for the foulest of criminals. A red notice for a publisher and a journalist. It's grotesque. the Crown Prosecuting Service, in its show trial of Julian Assange back in September, have brought disgrace upon themselves. Disgrace upon a nation in a show trial, unnecessary. The Australian government acquiesces, doesn't do anything. Acquiescence over time accumulates to complicity, brings disgrace upon itself. The Australian government thinks that state-to-state arrangements make the Australian polity secure, when in fact what makes the polity secure is a unification behind the government in the belief that the government will act in the interest of any citizen who is unfairly done by. That's where strength lays. Not in some arrangements over a glass of wine between the Australian Prime Minister and the Secretary of State. These things are important. The persecution of Julian, first of all, there was the Conventions of Asylum. 1958, they were put in place in the United Nations. 1973, under the authorship of Australia, they were ratified by the United Nations General Assembly, a massive majority. At that time, there were 10,000 people in missions in asylum in Santiago as Pinochet began murdering anybody who was in a union, anybody they didn't like. Lawlessness. Julian became an asylee. In that asylum was removed arbitrarily. You can't do that. There's a process, a lawful process to remove an asylum. 6 policemen broke into the embassy. They opened the door and Julian was dragged out. 3 hours later, a confused man was put before a trial judge who said, "Oh, you're a narcissist." This judge, who you would assume, had a law distinction, not a distinction in psychology. All of these insults, prejudices and persecution were put together in a document by Professor Nils Melzer, Professor of Law at Glasgow University, the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture and Unusual Punishment, after a visit of 3 hours length with 2 medical experts that evaluated Julian to see his conditions and concluded that he was a victim of psychological torture over a period of 7.5 years of calumnies, mobbings, smearings, fabrications, lies. That report submitted to the appropriate authorities in Sweden and the United Kingdom was ignored. No answers were given. The United Nations Working Group put together a report which declared that Julian was arbitrarily detained or to be released or allowed to take up the asylum offered by Ecuador and compensated by the United Kingdom and Sweden. It was derided. They put out a supplementary report in 2018, February, equally derided. The United Nations came into being in 1946. In 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt chaired the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The first President of the United States, Herbert Bear Everett, an Australian. This great, magnificent civil structure which allows states to negotiate in conversation their interests preventing the outbreak of war is ignored and forced to near collapse. Iraq war, illegal. I'll say that again. The Iraq war, the murder of 1 million people, the destruction of all of its infrastructure, illegal war. This magnificent structure, for some reason or other, and I call it despair when nation states do this, because they cannot any longer find within their bosoms the capacity to negotiate the human and understand each other and negotiate a way through competing interests. I call it despair. That's what I call it. Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning released, as has been mentioned, the diplomatic cables, the Iraq war files, the Afghan war files, 10 years ago, the Guantanamo Bay files. The great American lawyer Clyde Stafford Smith, a man with a giant heart, put together an NGO called Reprieve and went to Guantanamo Bay armed. He was armed with those cables. They're all in searchable form. Any of us can go online and search those cables, 250,000 of them, plus the Kissinger cables, and evaluate for ourselves and declare amongst each other and our friends and companions and raise the level by so doing of our that's the CIA. No. Raise the level of our understanding and consequently improve. That must be the FBI. Consequently, improve the quality of governance. 10 years went by, and slowly the information in those Afghan war files, the Iraq war files, the diplomatic cable, slowly it percolates its way through the polity, through us, and our understanding causes the government to remove the troops from Afghanistan, to contemplate and move towards closing Guantanamo Bay and ending the Iraq War. The Iraq War, how did that end? One of the cables described a circumstance in 2006 where a group of American soldiers, I don't much like accusation, so I don't want to burden those men's conscience any further. Occupying forces and pacifying a country that's resisting are always in a state of extreme agitation and fear. In particular, in Iraq, the IEDs would blow their testicles off because they explode upwards. It's not much fun, you know, and they lose their legs. So they're always in an agitated, fearful state, and they carry guns. Fear and guns means, well, you know the result. They went into a house and murdered the entire occupants, the mum and dad and grandfather, the whole extended family, the children. Contemplating this crime, they called in an airstrike, which destroyed the house and obliterated all evidence of that family from the earth forever. Upon reading the cable, the Iraqi government and the Iraqi people gathered up their courage. They had been destroyed, community, gathered up their courage and their unity and refused to sign the Status of Forces Agreement as a consequence. The United States and its allies, one of which is Australia, removed all their forces from Iraq war. Leaks stop wars. In the case of Clyde Stafford Smith, leaks bring justice. In an overall sense, in the trajectory of time, leaks have caused the removal of troops from Afghanistan, the closure of Guantanamo Bay, and the end of the war in Iraq. Now that congratulations not only goes to Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning and the staff of Wikileaks, it goes to yourselves, because it's your understanding that causes the government its anxiety and to close and end these wars. That is our understanding. What rough beast is our come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. So I've described the circumstances of that growth of bestiality. Now, with the freedom of Julian, and it will come, and the renewal of the United Nations, we can say to ourselves, once more, we emerge to see the stars.